I'd like to thank everybody for attending. Marion's going to be hosting the boardroom today, and it's about, do we make the most of our strengths? So without any further ado, I'll hand you over to Marion.
Thank you very much. So I picked this as a topic really as part of learnings from positive psychology, and as some of you may be, positive psychology is about the science of making life better, and looking at the positives. And we do have a natural tendency to think about weaknesses. But actually today, I would like us to spend a bit of time coming from the other direction and thinking about the strengths we might have that we might not be realising enough. And as those of you that come to these sessions have been before know that we have a bit of talk at the beginning, but then there's also quite a bit of discussion time, so that you hopefully go away with some very specific thoughts. So what I'm going to do is sort of a whistle-stop tour of strengths, really, but just a bit around developing our understanding of the benefits of drawing on our strengths, look at our own unique mix of strengths, and then think about what we mean by the optimal use of strengths. So if we go back to a fairly old sort of definition of drawing on the works of Aristotle, that to attain a good life, we strain every nerve to live in accordance with the best thing within us. And to go with a slightly more contemporary definition, Lindy's done a lot of work around strengths. And his definition is around a strength being a pre-existing capacity for a particular way of behaving, thinking or feeling that is authentic and energizing to the user and enables optimal function, development and performance. And those words, authentic and energizing, are very relevant to when we start to think about what our strengths will be. And strengths are not the same as the things we are good at, if that makes sense, because we can learn to do things. We can have learned behaviors so we become competent at them, but it's not drawing on a natural strength. We're not energized by actually doing or using that particular strength. And when we look at different strengths models and talk about strengths, there's no better or worse strengths. There's no hierarchy of strengths. It's how we identify the ones that we have and how we are using them to the optimum level, both separately and together, because with many of the strengths, we get greater performance from combining the use. So they're very much integral to who we are. We found through research that there are a lot of real evidence benefits of using our strengths. And if you think about it, if we're using a strength and we're achieving more, we're feeling authentic and we are energized, then it's quite likely there are a lot of positive outcomes of using a strength. So we know that people generally are overall happier when they're drawing on the things that they're naturally better at, more likely to be flourishing, again looking at that continuum of well-being, and flourishing being very much at the top end of it. General levels of confidence are higher. They're high levels of energy, less stress experience, more resilience, more likely to achieve goals, more engaged at work. So these are all things that have been evidenced through research. And using strengths give us the opportunity to make a real difference in how we're performing and what we're doing. And this isn't necessarily, or it isn't about ignoring weaknesses. It's about how we utilize our strengths to effectively make the weaknesses irrelevant. And then, when we've got our strengths working at an optimal level, then we can go back and look at weaknesses. But the evidence is definitely showing that we gain more from looking at the things that we are good at. So conversations started about strengths back in the 1980s, really before the positive psychology movement even started. Gallup was the first one to develop a measure of strengths, which is actually still going today. And there's various models, pros and cons with each. And as things developed, the concept of overused strengths was included. One of the models that is very well known is the VIA, the Values in Action Strengths Inventory. And this was developed by Marty Seligman, who was asked to develop a system that was effectively the total opposite to the DSM, which is the Manual of Mental Illnesses. So going to the other end. So he looked at, what should you include in a list of strengths? If you had to create a finite list, what would be on that list? So he considered it had to be something that was morally valued in its own right, that it's something that could manifest in a range of behaviours, thoughts, feelings and actions. It wasn't one specific thing. And crucially, actually, one person using that strength wasn't at the expense of somebody else. It wasn't reducing or devaluing somebody else through the use of doing that strength. So he was looking at a list that was universally valued, so recognisable across different cultures and different time periods. So VIA was introduced back in 2004. It's a non-profit making organisation that's still doing its research. So you can go on the website, viacharacter.org, and run your own strengths report if you're interested in that. And whilst the list of strengths he developed could be considered consistent across cultures, it was also recognising our strengths can be influenced by other things, the nature-nurture bit, the genetic element, our childhood experiences, just random things that happen to us in life. And that there's also that evolutionary perspective. Modern strengths, how they are used and evidenced will actually change as time goes on. And interestingly, only 1 in 3 of us are actually able to accurately name our strengths. And a survey of 18 and 19-year-olds found that 97% did not get their top strength right. So we don't always have the awareness to recognise what our strengths are. So the 6 categories within the VIA came under the level of wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. So wisdom is around, those things that relate to critical thinking things through, having that open-mindedness. Courage is about the honesty, the authenticity, the integrity of how we work. Humanity looks at, the kindness, the generosity, the nurturing element, compassion. Justice is very much around fairness, as you might imagine, the not feeling biased, letting bias affect our decisions. And temperance is more around the prudence, being careful, cautious, not taking undue risks. And finally, it's around the appreciation of beauty and excellence, that sense of awe and wonder in the world. And that list that they came up with, and I'm not expecting you to remember the list, but just gives you an idea of the types of things that we think of as strengths. So those are the list of the 24. When we are trying to identify our strengths, there's a number of things that we can do to help us spot our own strengths in the absence of any other profiles, but it's quite a useful tool to have anyway, in terms of communication tool, working with other people, how you can get the best out of people. You can pick up some of these things as signals as to what their strengths are, so you can help people play to their strengths. So when we are using our strengths, we will notice that our energy levels will be higher. We'll have a buzz, we'll be enjoying using them. We'll feel more like the real version of ourselves. This is the true self when we are using this strength. We'll find that things come easily to us, or more naturally. They feel natural when we are using it. We're much more likely to pay attention and to stay focused. We are likely to learn something quickly if we're using a strength. There's something that's natural within us. We're energized, motivated. We're going to learn something quickly and motivated to do it. catch somebody's voice or notice our own voice when it sounds much more enthusiastic and energized in relation to doing something. Language is positive, may well be linked to things that we enjoyed doing as a child and still do. And we'll more likely be using our strengths when we're doing things that actually get done, rather than the things that are on our to-do list that never quite seem to make it into an action. So those are the sorts of things that we would notice with strength spotting. So I'm going to suggest and ask you have a bit of time to think about your own strengths. So if the technology works, I'm going to summarize those strength spotting things into the chat. And Jo, am I doing rooms?
Yeah.
Or right? Okay, I'll do the rooms.
I've just made you host, so if you want to put people into breakouts, that should be fine.
Right, brilliant. Right, that's right. It's going into the chat. Technology has worked. Brilliant. Before I actually put you into the rooms, any comments, questions, observations on what I've said so far about what a strength is? You interested in any views?
Not around what a strength is, but found it quite interesting that only 1 out of 3 actually know their own strengths.
Because I think part of that is we tend to assume our strengths are the things that we are good at, but that's not natural. You know, sometimes if we have to learn to do something, we become competent at it, but it may drain us rather than energize us. So that may impact on why we may not recognize it. So I'm going to put you into 3 rooms. So you'll have 5 in a room. So hopefully everybody that's here is comfortable to participate, even if you haven't got your camera on here. Hi, I've seen a few familiar names that have come in. So have a chat in your groups. It's up to you how much you want to share openly about what you think your strengths are, but just chat through about what you think of the way you can spot strengths, how you might try and come up with 3. Well, if you do the reports, we usually talk about signature strengths as being the top strengths. So see if you, from that list of strength spotting tips, see what you might identify as your top 3. Okay, so I'll put you into the rooms and we will see you back afterwards. I'll put you into a room, Jo, if that's all right. Okay, I'll see you back after.